What Sterling did before finance swooped in to try and sell me on all the extra packages, he was like, okay, here's what you're going to do. They're going to try and sell you this, and this. And he's like, this is the one you want. This one, you don't need that. It's just unnecessary. This one, you can get it for $250 cheaper down the street. I will give you the number of the person who you need to call. Her name is Brenda. She's amazing. She'll take care of you. Tell her Sterling sent you. And he just rattled it off for me. And so not only were we able to get everything we wanted, we also avoided buying things we really didn't need, which was such an incredible experience.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 52 of Sales Stories in Real Life. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople share their stories about memorable buying experiences. We have got a very special guest with us today. I'm sure you probably already know her, and I don't need to intro her, but I'll go ahead and intro her anyway. She is a content creator, advisor, head of marketing, and a former seller herself, has generated over $10 million of pipeline in her very short career. Welcome to the show, Zoë Hartsfield. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on. I hear that you had a really interesting experience when you were buying a car and it almost went tragically and then I think was saved. What happened there, Zoë?
Okay, well, first of all, that was such a generous introduction. You're very good at that. Thank you. So a couple years ago, we were buying a car, and something about me, my family goes through cars, every couple of years. I grew up watching my parents, buy a new car every 2 years, kind of alternating between the two of them. I've been in that chair. I've watched my dad negotiate. Like, it's not new to me. And I've bought and sold several cars in my time as well. And a couple of years ago, my husband and I went to a dealership looking to purchase a vehicle for him. Now, we had every intention of having me kind of like handle that conversation because he's not familiar with the new car buying process, and I'm very familiar with it. And the sales rep assigned to us starts talking, and at first I thought it was kind of weird. He was sort of like ignoring my questions. I couldn't tell if he wasn't hearing me. And then it became very clear as we're like doing the test drives, I'm asking questions about the car. He's not talking to me. He's just talking to Chance. He thinks that my husband is the one like handling this conversation. He has no interest in what I have to say, the questions I have, even though like I'm the one kind of who did all the research and was going to go, handle that buying conversation. So we get back inside. We already knew we wanted to buy the car. We did like every buyer today. We did 80% of the research up front, and we went in ready basically to make a purchase as long as the test drive went okay. And this guy was really starting to irritate me at this point, but it got to like a head when I walked in and I was like, hey, we're going to buy this thing in cash. I have X amount of dollars. Like, this is what we're ready to do. I know it's a brand new car, but like, can you get it to this price? And he looked at me deadpan and he was like, you really going to try and Jew me down right now? And like, that's offensive regardless of who you are, but I also happen to be Jewish. And I was just, my jaw dropped. I could not believe a person who was trying to sell me something just said that to my face. And so he was like, fine, I'll go talk to my manager. And while he got up and went to go talk to his manager, we got up and we walked right out because I'm not interested in doing business with a person like that. We ended up coming back 3 days later because we did a little bit more research. We talked to a friend who had bought the same car a few weeks prior, and we were just like, we're going to buy this car. I just don't want to deal with that guy. And what I had done is the day before, I called my friend who used to work at that dealership and said, who is the guy I need to buy a car from? He said, oh, my guy, Sterling. You need to call him. So when we walked in, I asked for Sterling. He happened to be available. He walked over and he started helping us out. Well, the original guy who tried to sell us car saw us at Sterling's desk or whatever, and we're already like talking about paperwork and stuff like that. He was like, wait, I talked to you guys like a couple days ago. And I was like, yeah, good to see you. And he was like, Sterling, like, this is like, they're my customers. And I was like, no, we'd be happy to like stay working with him. And he was like, no. And he went and got his manager comes over and talks to us. And he was like, hey, like, were you guys working with him? And I was like, I will not buy a car from him, but I am prepared to buy this car today. And he said, great, carry on. And the guy was so upset, and the manager just like walked him out. It was like, whatever you did, because I didn't like talk to his manager and be like, these are the reasons why we're not going to buy a car from him. I was just like, no, if you want me to buy a car here today, it's not going to be from that guy. And I would really like to work with Sterling. And the manager was like, sure, go for it. So sit down with Sterling. It's kind of like an open and close case. And normally I wouldn't have picked this story because I know it's about like good buying experiences if it had just been this open and closed. But as we're sitting there, I don't know if you've ever bought a car or bought one recently where they kind of run you through like, here's all the add-ons and the service plans, and you could get your windows tinted and all this stuff that they're rattling off, right? That they're going to try and sell you. What Sterling did before finance swooped in to try and sell me on all the extra packages, he was like, okay, here's what you're going to do. They're going to try and sell you this, and this. And he's like, this is the one you want. This one, you don't need that. It's just unnecessary. This one, you can get it for $250 cheaper down the street. I will give you the number of the person who you need to call. Her name is Brenda. She's amazing. She'll take care of you. Tell her Sterling sent you. And he just rattled it off for me. And so not only were we able to get everything we wanted, we also avoided buying things we really didn't need, which was such an incredible experience and something that has stuck with me since then. We're thinking about buying a car again in the next 6 months. And who do you think is the first person I'm going to call? Sterling, because he sold me windshield insurance, which I don't know if you've ever been to Colorado, but people break their windshields here all the time. All the snow and the snow melt breaks up the roads, kicks rocks up into your windshield. You break windshields all the time. Had I not bought the insurance that he recommended to me for $1,000, I would be $3,400 out of pocket right now, a year and a half later, because we've already broken the windshield twice. But instead, it was paid for once, and every windshield I break here on out will be free to replace. And I never would have thought to add that on, but he saved me a ton of money in the long run. And that I'm really, really grateful for. So big fan of Sterling, buy from him again. And I thought it was a really solid turnaround considering how that buying experience started at that dealership.
I mean, not only is this a fantastic sales story, but this is just like a textbook case of incredible storytelling. There was like a massive conflict that needed to be overcome. And then Sterling came in with his cape and was the hero of the day. I struggle to even acknowledge what happened on earlier in the process, just because it is such atrocious behavior, and hatred like that should never be used, especially when you're trying to sell somebody something. So let's just pack that up and put that away, because that's horrible. Really sorry I had to go through that. Sterling came and saved the day, though. So shout out to Sterling. Let's go kind of all the way back to the beginning. There's a lot I want to deconstruct, because that was like really quite a riveting story. I already got the Cliff Notes pre-show, and I was like going all the way through all the emotions there with you. You had mentioned that you guys had went in just like every other B2B buyer and had done like 80% of the research up front. And we're pretty much just going in there for a formality of a test drive. And pretty much all guy number one had to do was just shut the hell up and give you the drive, and you guys were ready to buy. But of course, drop the ball there. What's kind of going through your mind at that point as a buyer, right? Like, you've done all the research, you know what you want, you need a couple questions asked, you're getting your questions ignored. How's that land for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's like the sort of bizarre component of like him just ignoring me and addressing my husband only. I was like, it's kind of like if you're in the buying process and somebody is like, are you the decision maker? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, no, your boss is probably the decision maker. It's like, no, like they gave me the authority to do this. Like sometimes AEs don't trust buyers that they have a say. And I know that right now there's like a lot of buying committees. It's really never like a single person purchase unless it's a really, really low ACV kind of contract. But in general, it's like a seller just ignoring you entirely. It's like they ignore my questions. They ignored that like he could have easily picked up on the cues that like I was the one kind of running this buying experience for us, and he just like blew right past it. My husband, now he would know all the questions to ask, but at that time he didn't, and he was just like, no, like she knows how to have these negotiation conversations, like she can do it. But the seller was like not interested in acknowledging that's the way we wanted to buy. I think it's kind of interesting when sellers try and shove buyers through a sales process based on preconceived notions. And I think like we were talking about this beforehand, something that you said you benefited from this show is that your discovery skills got better. This guy had no discovery. He didn't ask me a single question. He didn't even really ask Chance any questions either. It was just like, well, this is what you got to do. He's feature dumping. He was like talking about baseball. Like my husband doesn't care at all about sports. Like he was missing the mark in every single way. And I think had he slowed down, gotten a little curious, picked up on a couple of cues, it really could have ended differently from him. He could have had like the easiest sale of his day that day, and he blew it.
It's the difference of talking at someone versus talking with someone, right? Like sales has evolved to a point where you can't just go in and just run a very structured process from start to finish and like that's it, right? You have to be able to kind of add some personalized elements. You have to be able to read the room and audible if you need to audible. And this I thought was a really interesting takeaway too. And this is a very common theme of the show. And sellers listen up to this one. You probably would have never gone back to that dealership again. I feel pretty confident in saying that without asking you, had it not been for that referral, right? So like kind of go back to that moment where you had just had this horrible experience. There's about a 2-3 day break in between. I mean, I know myself, I'd drive 2 towns over, I'd drive the county over and just go to the same, whatever, Ford, whatever company it is, dealership in the next town over. But that referral kind of brought you back on track. Like, were you kind of thinking the same, or I guess what was going through your head there?
That's like, it's a perfect description of what happened. I was like, okay, there's 2 of these dealerships in town. I will go to the other one. But then I remembered that my friend had worked for this brand before, and I wasn't sure which of the dealerships he worked at. I just knew he worked for that specific car manufacturer. He sold those cars at one point. So I gave him a call and I was just like, hey, I don't remember which location you worked at, which one. He said the exact same one that I had just mentioned. I was like, okay, well, like if I were to go back there, who would you recommend? And he was like, you have to talk to Sterling. I'll text him right now and let him know to expect you tomorrow. And so that was like how we did it. And I was just really grateful for that because one, I probably would have wound up at another dealership, potentially gotten another kind of like, maybe not the best seller. Maybe I would have gotten a great one. Who knows? Like everybody's different. But because I called and I got that direct referral, I went back to the same place, which I wasn't planning to go back to. It was specifically because my friend said, oh yeah, I worked at that location. This is the guy you got to talk to. And he was totally right because I trust him. And that's like what the statistic is, something like referrals convert at like 7x the rate of cold outbound because there's like inherent trust and rapport. If it's like an actual direct one-to-one referral where there's like a real relationship, not just, somebody clicked your link in your post and then like, that's maybe not the same thing. But yeah, you're totally right. It was because my friend said, this is who you got to talk to. And he was absolutely correct. And I have actually sent Sterling a referral since then, because I just had a great buying experience. And so if you can provide an incredible experience and ask for referrals and build those sorts of relationships, he didn't ask me for a referral. I think when we left, he was like, if you know anybody else who's buying a car, like whatever, kind of like jokingly. But then of course, my sister needed a car 3 months later. And I was like, hey, go see my guy Sterling, and it was just like, it was really organic. And when you have a really positive experience, whether you're asking for referrals or not, that person is top of mind, especially for something so big ticket and like occasional, like a car, like switching software vendors. We're talking big contracts. People are careful with their cash like that. They're not, especially in this market, nobody's just signing 100K checks for these big enterprise softwares anymore. It's, going through the CFO, there's like an entire buying committee. So when you can get a referral and reduce that friction and build that trust, the likelihood of those big ticket, like tools and deals coming through goes way up. And in a market like this, like every single one of those counts.
It's the value of building trust, or as the LinkedIn world likes to say, play the long game, right? So I'm sure that Sterling had done right by your friend in the past, right? Which is why he sent you over to Sterling. And so sure, maybe you could have got another whatever little margin on the deal, but you treat somebody right and then it comes back to you in spades. And speaking of trust, I love what Sterling did there at the end. That was like such a happy ending to an otherwise atrocity of a story. Is you're going through the buying process now, or you're going through the negotiation process, let's just say. And he kind of gives you like, hey, they're going to try to sell you this. Don't do that. Get it from down the street instead. Hey, there's one thing that I recommend you buy, and it's the windshield wiper insurance, right? So what's kind of going through your head at that time when a salesperson is telling you not to buy something and sort of giving you the lay of the land to show you the best way to get that done?
Oh my gosh, it made me feel so much more trust. And I think the order of operations there is really, really important. The first thing he did is he heard us talking about getting the windows tinted. He's like, they'll charge you $500 here. You can get it for $250 down the street, and they literally just send it down the street. Like, he was like, that's who we use. But if you buy it from them directly, he was like, but don't tell them I said that to you. And I was like, yeah, you're good. But it's like, because he started with I'm going to save you money right now, go buy our, basically, like, not even our competitor, but it's like they lose the channel sale. They lose like the commission on that. He's like, I'm going to save you money. It's fine. And then when he said the windshield insurance, I was like, okay, I believe, like, I trust you more. I believe you. If he had led with, here's this add-on you should really, really buy, and here's why, I might have said yes. Like, his logic made sense, but I was just immediately like, of course, like, whatever you say, I'll do whatever, because I trust you. And so I think it did a lot to build that like foundational trust and relationship. And I think it would have maybe gone a little bit different if he had led with, these are the things you should buy first. But yeah, I mean, as sellers, we have a responsibility to solve our customers' problems. And like, you can do that a lot of ways. It doesn't necessarily, our responsibility isn't to make our commissions check as big as possible, although that is an excellent byproduct. It is to actually help people solve their problems. And I think when buyers come into those conversations genuinely like seeing that as the goal and detaching from the outcome, you have a better buying experience, and inevitably you're a better seller because of it.
Really good call out on the order of operations, because like you said, spot on. If you would have sat down and you're negotiating, say, hey, here's the one thing that I recommend you buy. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to do this, this, and this. It doesn't quite hit the same as that pattern interrupt of you're sitting down negotiating and they're saying, hey, don't buy this. They're going to try and sell you this. Don't do this. It's almost like disarming you, like before you can even kind of like have a second to be skeptical. So I love that, because that really directly translates to B2B. Like, if you're selling software, anything B2B, don't start with, hey, here are all the add-ons and all the extras you need to buy. Start off with what's not necessary and build backwards from there. So speaking on relevance to B2B, we got a lot of B2B sellers that are listening to the show. We obviously just broke down a lot of your extremely riveting story, and now we're kind of starting to wrap here. What would be the one thing that you would recommend for our sellers that are listening as the one biggest takeaway from this episode?
This might feel counterintuitive in this market, but I live and die by this. Sell your buyer the best solution, even if it isn't yours. And I think what you can pull from that story is, Sterling sent me down the street because he was like, you're going to save $250 and it's the exact same thing. Go buy it from them. It was exactly what I needed. He was able to save me a bunch of money, and he knew it was the best solution to my problem. When I was a seller, I used to sell a video software, and we had a couple main competitors, products I actually use today, Loom, Vidyard. Those tools have differentiators that make them better for certain circumstances. And sometimes I would get a hold of a key account or something like that, and they would be like, this is what we need. I don't need XYZ. And I would tell them, you know what, if that's the thing that is going to solve your problem, you may want to talk to them. If you want these sorts of results, I can help you with that. And I've actually sent my competitors a couple of referrals, because there are certain instances where it's just like, you know what, that's not really what we do, you know? And so that has come back around for me though. It's like kind of weird that competitors may send business back and forth, but sometimes, you know, your product overlaps 70% and somebody really needs to buy in that 30 that you don't do. Like, trying to jam someone into something that doesn't really fit doesn't build trust. It doesn't build rapport. It honestly just generates churn 12 months from now. So play that long game, sell the best solution, because those people remember and they'll come back to you, maybe at your next job, or when they do need that 70% that you provide.
Well said. You're using building trust as the KPI over this deal, this quarter, this month, this week's pipeline call. That's the way to do it, right? Like, it's a very small B2B world. It's a very long trajectory of buying. So someone that you refer to a competitor 2 years ago may come back to you 2 years later, and now you're the Sterling, or you're the friend that's referring you to Sterling, right? And now you're that trusted advisor, if I will. I know that can sometimes be cringe.
No, I think that's true. And I think the other thought I have is like, I don't want to make it seem like this happens all the time. It's not like I'm sending 80% of my pipeline to my competitors. It's, there's a handful of edge cases where maybe you get somebody coming inbound who doesn't totally understand what you do and they think you do one thing and you're like, we don't quite do that thing, but we could solve this other problem for you. And they're like, really, this is the problem I want to solve right now. It's like, okay, I know a couple people over here who do that thing. Let me help you out. And by the way, when you need help with XYZ, I'm right here. Like, we'll part ways as friends and hit me up when you need me. And then I follow up with that person in 6 months and it's a deal 6 months from now or next year or something like that. It is about that trust. If I had tried to hard sell them into the product before they were ready for it, adoption would have been terrible. Usage would have been terrible. They would have eventually churned. And that's something that I learned from doing the opposite. So it takes trial and error, learn from my mistakes. Don't do what I did super early on. It's like really, really try and solve people's problems. And again, it's like sell the best solution, even if it's not the one that your product offers.
Zoe, that was amazing. I'm not even going to add anything on top of that because you like so perfectly baked that cake and iced it and put the cherry on top. And I'm not even going to go and ruin it. This has been an absolute blast. I know that you are working on a whole lot. So why don't you plug some with the audience before we jump, Zoe?
Let's see. I'm jumping back into TikTok, not too corporate on TikTok. Going to be making a lot more content in the coming weeks and months. We're really excited about it. Finally have more bandwidth on LinkedIn. And yeah, I mean, watch more sales stories in real life. These are great.
Well, appreciate the double plug there. Go follow Zoe on LinkedIn. Go follow Zoe on TikTok. Zoe on Threads. I don't know. Threads is all
I'm on Threads. So good. What do you know your number? Do you know what number you were on Threads?
Shocker, do not have a Threads. So I know the humanity. How could I?
How could you? Oh, well.
This has been a blast, Zoe. Again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and incredible story and storytelling skills with us all. Sales Stories in Real Life fam. We will see you next week. Cheers.